Hi. Hi, I'm natekokernot, and I want to welcome you to my channel. I've been discussing the 7 steps of principles of forgiveness this past week, and today I'm going to cover the 5th principle, which is the idea that there is no order of difficulty to miracles and no hierarchy to illusions. What this principle is really getting at is that some things are simply true and other things are not. A Course in Miracles insists that the following ideas are not true: sickness, death, conflict, scarcity, other people with opposing agendas, attack, sin, and any will apart from God's will. It is pointless to put them in any sort of order, or to say that this illusion is more untrue than that illusion, or less untrue. They are all equally untrue. One way that I often try to color in this concept is to direct my audience's attention to the binary system, which, to my limited knowledge, is involved in computer processing, as well as other technologies like analog recordings. It's really just a system of ones and zeros. The ones represent something that is, in this case, and the zeros represent something that is not. Now, we all know that we can draw a tiny zero or a big zero. We can even go as far as to construct a billboard-sized zero out of neon lights that blinks and flashes at drivers going by. But guess what? The value of that neon zero is still exactly 0, which is the same value of the 0 that you wrote with your pen. They all just amount to 0, 0, 0. An illusion is just an illusion, no matter the apparent grandiosity of the 0. Another great example is medical conditions. We've all heard that Jesus was able to heal the sick. He cured blindness, he cured lepers. There were even a couple of incidents in which he undid death. Jesus made no distinction between the untruth of an ingrown toenail and death. He just saw them as equally untrue. He also didn't heal people on his own. He required them to believe along with him, if only for one instant, that this condition they were suffering from was simply an illusion. In order to undo the illusion, he needed them to join with him in truth. We often see our problems in this way. We might hear our friend or family member describing their problem, and then we'll compare their problem to our own problems, and we'll usually tend to magnify our own problems, probably because they're ours and they affect us directly. And we'll tend to minimize the magnitude of the other person's problem because it doesn't directly affect us. This is obviously a deterrent to the compassion and empathy that we hope to receive when we're venting about our problems to others. The other person, that one who is on the receiving end of the venting, might be thinking their problems are far greater problems than yours, so they don't think you deserve the space to be held for you as much as they deserve the space to be held for them. Clearly, their problems are of a far greater magnitude. They're more real than your problems. No, the truth is true and nothing else is true. Problems themselves are not true. The reason problems are not true is that we are in heaven, now. All our problems, from the slightest inconvenience to the most abhorrent attack against us, are all equally untrue in heaven, and heaven is our true reality. This form that we call reality is completely and utterly untrue, and that applies to all of the problems we think we have, both big and small. It is an uncompromising way of looking at reality, and holding on to this principle naturally takes us away from comparisons, which are one of the ego's favorite ways of proving our separateness to ourselves and each other. Our belief in separation itself is just a mistake, and it's really just a mistake in perception. An ingrown toenail and stage 4 cancer are both equally untrue. A miracle, as defined by A Course in Miracles, is simply a change in perception, from seeing what is not true to seeing what is true. The miracle is the most natural thing of all. In the first chapter of A Course in Miracles, the author lays out 50 miracle principles, and the very first principle is this. The first principle of miracles is that there is no order of difficulty among them. One is not harder or bigger than another. They are all the same. End quote. So the very first step in becoming a miracle worker is to forego making comparisons of any sort. This person's form of suffering isn't more real or more unfair or unjust than that person's form of suffering. The other trend that has really complicated the clearness of this picture for us is postmodernist thinking. I'm not exactly a critic of postmodernism. It came about gradually in the second half of the 20th century as a sort of truce, since previously we must have been arguing too much about what is true and what isn't true. The truce came in this form. Why don't we all agree that every one of us has our own personal truths, and that there is no truth beyond those personal truths? It made sense on many levels and probably led to a lot of truces in the form of, well, we'll just agree to disagree. And it was helpful to that extent, but it was fated to lead to chaos like we're experiencing in the last decade. The unforeseen problem was that we basically abandoned the search for any sort of capital T truth that could be true apart from the personal truths we all separately subscribe to. I contend that there must be some truth about how everything hangs together in the larger sense, and whatever that truth is, it is true regardless of whether we believe in it or not. The truth is indifferent to our opinions, and this is the premise on which A Course in Miracles was written. The question that arises from statements such as these is, of course, who gets to be the authority? Who gets to decide what's true and what's not true? I would argue that the only possible authorities would be those who have stepped away from the battlefield of this life that's filled with conflict, attack, and defense. Someone who has arisen above the battlefield to see it from above. Now, one such person or soul, I would contend, is Jesus. And what Jesus is telling us is that only love is true. And love is the awareness that we are all one mind, one being, with all of our varying beliefs, be they in the political realm or in the social realm. I can't imagine another capital T truth that all of us could possibly decide to agree about. And I believe that eventually we will all inevitably come to this truth, once we've exhausted all the other ways that we imagined might lead us to salvation, peace, and joy. When we do all agree on this, and it will probably take much more time before we do, that will spell the end of illusion, and also the end of this world of separation, which we all still believe to be true. That brings me to another quote from A Course in Miracles, which I will conclude today's presentation with. It's a prediction of sorts, although considering who is making the prediction, I'd say it's a foregone conclusion. Before I read it, I want to thank you for joining me here today, and I'll just quickly mention that I would appreciate very much if you hit the like and subscribe buttons so the algorithm can work in my favor. I hope you all have a beautiful day full of miracles, and I'll see you next time. Now here's the quote. The world will end in joy because it is a place of sorrow. When joy has come, the purpose of the world has gone. The world will end in peace because it is a place of war. When peace has come, what is the purpose of the world? The world will end in laughter because it is a place of tears. Where there is laughter, who can no longer weep? Who can longer weep? And only complete forgiveness brings all this to bless the world. In blessing it departs, for it will not end as it began. To turn hell into heaven is the function of God's teachers, for what they teach are lessons in which heaven is reflected. And now sit down in true humility and realize that all God would have you do, you can do. Do not be arrogant and say you cannot learn his own curriculum. His word says otherwise. His will be done. It cannot be otherwise, and be you thankful it is so.